Over a century later, America needs this kind of leadership more than ever. We need a president who sees government not as a tool of enriching well-connected friends and high-priced lobbyists, but as the defender of fairness and opportunity for every American. That's what this country's always been about, and that's the kind of president that I intend to be. We cannot settle for a second Gilded Age in America, and yet we find ourselves once more in the midst of a new economy where more wealth is in danger of falling into fewer hands, where the average CEO now earns more in one day than an average worker earns in an entire year, where Americans are struggling like never before to pay their medical bills or their kids' tuition or high gas prices, all while the profits of the drug companies and the insurance companies and the oil industries have never been higher. And once again, we're faced with a politics that makes all this possible. In the last 6 years, our leaders have thrown open the doors of Congress and the White House to an army of Washington lobbyists who have turned our government into a game only they can afford to play. A game played on a field that's no longer level, but rigged to always favor their own narrow agendas. From Jack Abramoff to Tom DeLay, from briberies to indictments, the scandals that have plagued Washington over the last few years have been too numerous to recall. But their most troubling aspect goes far beyond the headlines that focus on the culprits and the crimes. It's an entire culture in Washington. Some of it's legal, some of it's not, that allows this to happen. And what's most outrageous is not the morally offensive conduct on behalf of these lobbyists and legislators, but the morally offensive laws and decisions that get made as a result. The drug and insurance industries, just to take one example, spent $1 billion in lobbying over the last decade. $1 billion, an average of $100 million a year. And they got what they paid for when their friends in Congress broke the rules and twisted arms to push through a prescription drug bill that actually made it illegal for our own government to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies for cheaper drug prices. Once that bill passed, those companies rewarded 15 government officials and congressmen who worked on the bill with cushy lobbying jobs that pay millions of dollars. And yet, right now, there are parents and grandparents in this country who will walk into a drugstore and wonder how their Social Security check is going to cover a prescription that's more expensive than it was a month ago, who will be forced to choose between their medicine and their groceries because they can no longer afford both. This isn't the government they deserve. Another example, the oil companies were allowed to craft energy policy with Dick Cheney in secret while every other voice was silenced, including the NASA scientists who tried to warn us about the dangers of climate change. The industry got every single thing it wanted, and it even got one of its top lobbyists a job at the White House as an environmental watchdog, a job he used to fix reports that showed a link between carbon emissions and global warming. Today, our planet is 6 years closer to a tipping point on climate change. Our country grows more dependent by the day on oil supplied by some of the world's most dangerous and defiant regimes. And in a year where Exxon reported the biggest annual profit of any U.S. corporation in history, our families are heading into a summer where they could pay up to $4 a gallon for gasoline in some places. This isn't the government that we deserve. At least 8 top officials in our own education department have taken or had jobs in the student loan industry, including one who was fired for still owning $100,000 worth of stock in that same industry. This is somebody who worked in the federal government's education department. These same private lenders and banks who have been caught actually bribing colleges to steer business their way. The same ones who charge taxpayers $8 billion a year to provide student loans at inflated rates instead of offering the loans directly and using the savings to help more students. And we wonder why 200,000 students didn't go to college in one recent year for the simple reason that they couldn't afford it. You need more examples. Billions of no-bid, no-string-attached contracts have been handed out in New Orleans and Iraq and at Walter Reed Medical Center on the sole basis of who you know and the favors you've done. And yet we're somehow surprised when the families in the Ninth Ward are still living in trailers, or our soldiers don't have the body armor they need, or our veterans are forced to come home to squalor and neglect. This is not the government they deserve. This is not the America we believe in. And this is the kind of politics that will end when I am president.